I'm your host, Shenea Stiletto. My guests on today's Live Like An Acrobat podcast are the co-founders of Circus Meets Medicine, Dr. Nathan Hollister and Scott McDonald. Welcome, guys, to the podcast.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
So happy to be here. Thank you, Shenea.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you both are here. We're here to discuss your Circus Meets Medicine medical conference. And for listeners, join us. This is Circus Meets Medicine for an exciting and unique event where the worlds of circus and medicine collide. The Circus Meets Medicine medical conference is a one-of-a-kind gathering of medical professionals, researchers, and circus performers. This in-person event will be held at the Blasco event wing of the UNLV Foundation building, 4505 South Maryland Parkway, Las Vegas, Nevada, USA. Discover the fascinating connections between circus arts and medicine through engaging presentations and demonstrations. Enhance your patient care by learning firsthand about the physical demands, potential injury risks, and rehabilitation protocols associated with performers in the circus community. From acrobatics to handbalancing, juggling to aerial arts, this conference will showcase the incredible synergy between these two seemingly different worlds and provide attendees with valuable knowledge. Connect with like-minded individuals who share a passion for both medicine and the circus. Network with experts in the field, exchange ideas, and forge new collaborations. Whether you are a medical professional, a circus performer, or simply curious about this intriguing intersection, this event is a must attend. Don't miss out on this extraordinary opportunity to witness the Circus Meets Medicine medical conference firsthand. Mark your calendars and get ready for an unforgettable experience in Las Vegas. And to continue to open up this episode, I wanted to start with a quote from your Circus Meets Medicine survey, which I'm very excited to discuss the research evidence that you got from your survey from the both of you. Many circus performers distrust their medical personnel and will avoid reporting injuries because our bodies are our paychecks. It's easier to perform through pain and still be able to afford rent than to be taken out of shows and not get paid. I avoided telling my medical staff that I subluxed my shoulder for precisely this reason, as well as to avoid adding even more conditioning to an already overwhelming training schedule. I've had very positive relationships with members of the performance medicine department and would absolutely trust and confide in some of them. But I've also had others tell me it's my fault that I severed multiple ligaments during rushed emergency rehearsals, trying to get me to replace performers in understaffed shows with zero instruction or prior knowledge of the equipment I was using. And so this was from a participant of your Circus Meets Medical survey, and I thought it was a brilliant, it kind of encapsulates everything that you both are doing with your brilliant efforts. So to start it off, I would love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds. Dr. Nate, you can go first, and then we'll skip over to Scott about who you both are, what are your backgrounds, and how you came to create Circus Meets Medicine, and then how that kind of transformed into the medical conference and also to the very important survey that you produced.
Yeah. So my name's Dr. Nate Hollister. I am an emergency medicine physician here in Las Vegas at our only level 1 trauma center. And so what got me into this originally was I was a gymnast growing up. So I was a gymnast all the way growing up. I had my fair share of emergency department visits as a kid and specifically remember certain things like when I was learning a double-double. And you don't pull it enough or you pull it too much and you get concussed and you're trying to explain to a doctor what a double-double is as like a teenager. And you're like, no, it's like more twists, no, like a lot of force into the ground, head bang hard. And the doctor's like, okay, CT scan, let's go. But from that, I eventually got my master's in biological ethics, and then went on to medical school at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., where I worked a lot with event medicine and disaster medicine. So that's more doing medicine outside of the hospital. How do you do them at large events, which then went very, very smoothly into the COVID pandemic, where everything shut down and I was no longer able to do any of the things that kind of brought me happiness or joy. And that is actually where I found circus, because the trapeze rig was outside and the closest person to you was holding lines down below. And so that's what started that. When I moved to residency, I got into residency in Las Vegas and kind of continued that joy and that passion, was able to continue training trapeze, was able to start to learn new apparatuses like tramp wall and do more flatbed stuff. And just through connecting with a lot of the local acrobats and artists and performers, got to hear just some of the troubles and difficulties they had navigating the medical system firsthand, and then being on my off time in the performing world and then on my on time in the hospital, I was able to see some of the ways, okay, well, maybe these are some of the problems that are happening, and maybe these are some of the ways that I can fix it both from the inside and from the outside, which led me to meeting my co-founder, Scott McDonald, who I'll let him introduce himself now.
Alrighty. Well, my path to all this was a little bit different, but yeah, my name's Scott McDonald. I'm a former, basically on again, off again Cirque du Soleil performer. I've been in a total of 5 of their productions, 3 of them being permanent ones, 2 of them being sort of special events, and besides that, a ton of other shows. We typically don't just waltz into Cirque du Soleil as our first performing stop on the whole career path. But yeah, I started as a martial artist, got into tricking from there, and then over the last 24 years, just sort of started branching out and became very much a generalist. And yeah, I've had my fair share of injuries. Surprise, surprise. I've been doing flips for 2.5 decades, and I would say the worst one was probably or not concussing myself, although that was involved, but fracturing my skull in a trampoline accident. But a plethora of injuries of all different sorts, and I've witnessed in myself how that's affected me, but also in so many of my coworkers and just friends in the industry. But the one sort of consistent thing that I noticed, never really thought how to act upon, but noticed, was that there's just sort of a dearth of knowledge in the outside world about circus. If you say that you're a circus acrobat to most people, they immediately leap to and you are either a clown or a juggler on a unicycle. And those are real things, absolutely. And they're very skillful things that take a lot of training, but there's so much more. It's a very broad umbrella. And I think a lot of people in the outside world wouldn't consider, for example, the amount of Olympians and world champions who wind up in the circus, not specifically Cirque du Soleil, but just in general, and the breadth of these disciplines they do. For example, at O and formerly Le Rêve, there are Olympic synchronized swimmers. We have trampolinists, gymnasts, sports acrobatics, such as yourself. And then beyond the more, I don't want to say conventional, because none of those things are conventional by any stretch of the imagination, especially not in America, but the other smaller disciplines in which people are not going and competing necessarily worldwide. Sometimes they are, things like sear wheel and German wheel. In any case, I first crossed paths with Nathan at Open Gym, and we just got to talking about these situations and the feelings that sometimes people have in this industry of being unheard or dismissed because they simply are misunderstood. I don't think anyone in the medical field is seeking to deliberately dismiss anybody, but there's just a lack of research and a lack of knowledge on these things. I have a student, for example, who has been suffering from shin splints due to tricking injuries and repetitive use injuries, which I honestly believe are the majority of our injuries in this world. But if you go to a physical therapist or a doctor or anyone and you say, "Oh, I do tricking," they just kind of look at you blankly. I've been admitted to the hospital twice for sear wheel injuries. I had a sear wheel fall on the back of my head and split it open, and also split my chin open. But again, if you go to a hospital and you're admitted to the ER and you need stitches and they're like, "What happened?" and you say, "Oh, a sear wheel fell on me," they have no idea what you're talking about. And if you further extrapolate that to, "Oh, a giant metal hula hoop that I spin in fell on me," they'll just, again, look at you like, "Okay, then." So we just decided that it would be a good thing to take the initiative and try and create advocacy and understanding and awareness of this world in the broader medical field, especially in Las Vegas, considering this truly is, I would say, the central hub of circus globally. Montreal is a massive place for circus, and a lot of places in Europe are as well, China as well. But if you look at the amount of shows and acrobats, technicians, coaches, artistic directors, everyone involved from the top down in the circus world, I would argue that Las Vegas is the place to be. So, given that we have so many other mainstream sports that are coming here, whether it's the UFC, Formula One, we have a Major League Baseball stadium under construction, the Raiders are here. So many things are happening, but at the same time, for 3 decades now, at least with the presence of Cirque du Soleil, there have been a ton of professional athletes here that just kind of flew under the radar. So, hence, Circus meets medicine.
That's brilliant. I love the introduction from both sides, and thank you both so much. And this gets into the advocacy where you are both seeking to have circus arts injuries receive their own category and recognized medically in that way. And, you know, again, that's where we intersect in doing advocacy, trying to get circus arts recognized as an independent or as in an independent category by the National Endowment for the Arts, which it also does not have. And maybe the two will happen at the exact same time, but you guys are pushing for policy. And that's what I really love about your efforts, because again, we also know that just doing things like on a private level only goes so far, and that there needs to be things that are actually recognized, documented, have government behind it to a certain extent. I mean, we don't have unionizing here within Vegas like all of the other sports environments that you spoke about. So there's no one advocating for us. I always remind people of that, because people really do think that we have a union. They think that the circus arts here, at least in Las Vegas, has union strategy, as people voicing these concerns like you both are, and that they have people lobbying and advocating for us in Washington, D.C. And we all know that that is not a reality, and that that's coming now from those of us within the organization and asking the different questions and posing things in a different way. It's not just, can we get funding for this research project that we want to do for circus arts injuries? It's like, wait a second, this needs to be recognized on a fundamental level. So there's fundamental change and a shift. So can you both please speak and articulate around circus arts injuries being recognized, and how you hope that by bringing around all this awareness from all the brilliant work that you're both doing, you can get to that point of recognition?
Yeah, I can speak to that first, which is one of the things that's really important, speaking from inside the medical community, like as a physician, especially as an emergency physician or someone that's pushed to see patients by speed. When you are an emergency physician, just like a open book here is, I am judged by the speed at which I see patients. I am judged by patients per hour. So I'm supposed to hit somewhere between 2 and 3 patients per hour. So that's giving me about 30 minutes max to introduce myself to you, fully take your history, do a physical exam, order whatever labs and imaging I want, interpret those labs and imaging, come up with a plan, tell you the plan, have you agree with the plan, get your discharge paperwork written, and get you discharged. That's not much time when you think about it. So what a lot of physicians rely on is, we rely on pattern recognition and we rely on decision rules. So there's very important decision rules for different populations. And one of the most basic ways that we separate our populations is we have pediatric, our patients that are under 18, and our geriatric, generally our patients that are above 65. Sometimes those numbers budge a little bit, but I can use different decision rules. Cool, this is a 35-year-old female complaining of right upper abdominal pain. These are the rules I need to apply. This is what I need to order. I don't have to think that hard about it, so I can just go automatically. One of the other things that's starting to get a little more traction is when you start to have athletes. And so we have a big difference between our general athletes that come in and a general population. Because if a general population, what's bringing you back to your daily activities is sitting at a desk job, being able to wash your hair, wipe your butt, cook your food, and then work at a desk job, maybe lift 20 pounds in front of you. That's what like occupational health and all these people can try and help get you back to doing your daily activities. Now with athletes, this is where we started to get our concussion protocols. And what do we do for football players and concussions, rugby players, soccer players? But one of the things that's missing with a lot of this is you have no one in these like acrobatic spheres, or sorry, not no one. You have people that are in those acrobatic spheres, but even if that information is being made, it's not necessarily getting out that wide. So one of our big goals between me and Scott is not only to do this research, but to see what endpoints can you make from this? What actual tangible change can come from this? And how can you distribute this across the world to our medical providers so that they can be different, so that they do understand. For example, one of my good friends that was doing Lyra and other aerial apparatuses would not be able to get their flu shot very often, because if I'm going 30, 40 feet in the air and I'm hanging by my shoulder, which is the one thing that's keeping me alive off of splat on the stage, I don't want to be sore in that shoulder from getting a flu shot. And then I just had mentioned, like, offhand, I was like, you can get the flu shot in like any large muscle. You can like get a flu shot in the butt. You can get it in your leg, any of these things. All of a sudden, oh, I can go and get all these things done. And it's a very simple thing that their physician, their primary care physician, their urgent care physician, their ER physician should be able to work through that, should be able to think about that. Like, what is actually their barrier to health? What is actually the barrier? Because it's not athletes are difficult patients. It's not these patients are being intentionally going against your advice. It's that there's many, many other things under the surface that are coming to play here. And we need to have either guidelines or at least research that can point us in a direction to affect how doctors can take care of these individuals. And that's been my large goal through all of this.
To piggyback on that from the other side of the fence, in the circus world, we are typically paid per show. And a lot of people in this world, many of us are immigrants. I am an immigrant. And you're usually here on either a P1 or an O1 visa that's provided by the company that you work for. If you ruffle the feathers, it might not go so well for your continued employment and therefore residency. Beyond that, it ends up being, in my opinion, this sort of unfortunate feedback loop where the physicians don't necessarily know how to address these issues because there is, as Nate said, no data about it, no research. On the other side, a lot of the people in the circus distrust and actively will either misconstrue or simply avoid seeking any medical contact because the reason I just said. And therefore, there gets to be even less data because the injuries go unreported. It's this unfortunate thing. And basically, the whole crux of this conference is we're trying to just foster better communication and understanding. No one's trying to witch hunt anyone from either side of the fence. It's just a matter of medical professionals take care of us. We need taken care of. We all just need to get along on it somehow.
And let me just add into
Yeah.
that the last thing, because that
Mhm.
brings up a good point, is it's not only neither of us are saying there's no research or no data on this. It's
Mm-hmm.
there is data, and there are some people doing some great, great work on this, and especially a lot of our PTs, a lot of our
Mm-hmm.
physical therapists are doing amazing data. And I can tell you the amount of doctors that are looking at that data is little to none or not enough. And so, not only fostering that kind of environment where people can work together, but also highlighting the great work that some of the people before us have already done and bringing that to light so people can build off of that, grow off of that, and support their efforts. Like, these are people like me and Scott who are doing this on their own from the goodness of their heart, from what they love, and they need more support and they need more recognition because they are doing great work out there. And I don't think enough people are really appreciating the work they're doing.
And sorry, not trying to just
Oh,
babble over you
continue.
all the time, but one of the things to that end that I just want to bring up as well is at the conference, one of the speeches that I'm personally most excited for is my friend Kate Perlswig. She is the current head of performance medicine for the resident show division of Cirque du Soleil. She was the head of PMed, performance medicine, for me when I was a trampolinist at Beatles Love. She's great. She's extremely knowledgeable, but she's going to be speaking. And to be clear, none of this is a collaboration with Cirque or any other company. This is an independent effort. But I'm so excited to have someone like her there who has seen the patterns and has seen the data firsthand to really just give an honest look at what's going on. Because one thing that I've noticed is a lot of people see big death defying stunts and crazy flips and they think, oh my God, death and injury. But really, that's not the case. It's remarkably consistent and safe. What we do is something that we can replicate at least 10 times a week plus rehearsals because you have to be able to. That is the show volume. But show volume is the whole issue at the same time. With most resident shows in Las Vegas of any company, you're going to be doing at minimum 200, but more realistically close to 500 shows a year plus rehearsals. And that just leads to repetitive use injuries. It's almost like being someone who works in a warehouse and your lower back hurts because you're constantly having to bend over and pick up a crate, things like that. So I'll disappear now.
Please don't disappear. This is your guys' episode, and there's a lot to cover in a very short amount of time. And you're so brilliant, and I really love you both for all the work that you're doing, reminding everyone that this is independent. I wanted to speak to the whole concussion thing, and obviously how important that is. I am a survivor of UC gymnastics, and even recently they started to see more and more of us doing concussion data. So I participated in that, which has been brilliant in bringing that concussion data to even being a part of cases, being a part of criminal cases, things of that nature. And they're seeing more gymnastics brains. So that's even something that has changed with respect to how they see athletes, who they've been getting the data on. Because when I've been there and been working with the Dr. Amen Clinic now for the past few years, they're like, we are so happy, not that you all are here, but that we're seeing so many more gymnasts. We're seeing so many more of you and more of your brains, so we can understand what goes on with you. And then now all of those things are admissible in court. And that can definitely sway, using that science, cases like that I was involved in, and so many survivors of USA gymnastics that were victims of, egregious sexual abuse. The other thing I want to speak to about making all this data very prolific and out there, even recently, not until like that long ago, there was cases where, gymnasts on the Olympic level of that nature that didn't have access to health insurance, for example, through like USA Gymnastics, people that no one would have thought did not have access to health insurance to have these careers where they are on the track for 2024. So people had to get on Twitter and basically say, hey, like, why aren't these people insured? Like, they are competing for a multi-million-dollar nonprofit, or in our cases, many times multi-million-dollar companies. And people don't realize the lack of benefit that you sometimes have. Not saying that everybody's underinsured, because we will go into the data that you guys have from your survey, which is also very enlightening to see who's insured and who is not, and that actually doesn't come down to things, but also break down the multitude of situations of how you can maybe be insured in a show but not be insured outside of the show, and how that also impacts your career. But to speak to the people on Twitter, due to that level of outrage, they got responses from USA Gymnastics. They got these people insured that are competing on these Olympic levels. So when people speak about, advocacy and why that's so important, why it's so important to use all of these different platforms like a podcast or things of that nature, not keeping all that data internal, which I've spoken about many times before. The data is there. Most oftentimes it's very internal. We don't get access to it. And for some of that data, we have to go through senators or congresspeople to actually have documents that ask for that data that, we wouldn't be able to have, access to, or companies outside of a very big network would not have access to. Even speaking to, you're talking about, Scott, of, the companies, putting us through so many different shows, and who has the rights and say and the say over that. Even in arena tours, you have Cirque du Soleil, who is subject to arena union law for the riggers, for example, but not for the artists that are within that. So if you need to do something 20 times, you can't do that, because from union standards, you can only do that trick twice. So that leads to injury. I've heard that years. I was even at the effect of that many times in my career. So we even have that, where I'm a proponent of unions, but you also see how union standard can collide when, again, who is at the table making these decisions hand in hand, and who has the voice, who gets to be on the boards with the Cirque du Soleil and making those decisions. And maybe sometimes the bottom line is more about money than the artist, which we're not condemning any of those things. That's just how big business and corporations work. But I think that it takes the independent voices of advocacy to change that. And I think that that's where, again, you guys come in, and efforts of different levels of advocacy that I'm participating in as well come in ways that weren't necessarily there before. So we're at about the 24-minute mark of about like our 30-minute conversation. So I'd love for you both to go into the survey data that you discovered, and then go again to give us a little bit of a brief overview of what people can expect from the Circus Meets Medicine medical conference. And then I'd also like to hear a little bit about what you're doing with maybe the undergraduate program of having circus arts recognized at UNLV too, if there's time for that. So Nate, Dr. Nate, or Scott, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I can go into the actual data first of what we did. We basically sent out a survey looking at professional acrobat or professional performers, and just seeing what their relationship with medicine is. To go really quickly on that, we sent the survey out to a bunch of training gyms and backstage, and just professional artists. We got about 139 responses. It was pretty even with 65 males, 68 females, and 6 non-binary respondents. Of them, what the really interesting data showed is we looked at how many of them were avoiding medical care, and about 68.35% said that at least at one point in time they have purposely avoided seeking medical care, meaning they thought that they had something that could be seen by a medical professional and chose not to. In addition to that, almost 52% of them had admitted to hiding an injury. And what I do want to bring light to is this is an anonymous survey, but this is still people admitting to it. And so these are the people that have said yes. I do think that this might be underreported, but this gives us a floor at least. It gives us a floor of at least 52% says they purposely not only not sought care, but hid the injury, took actions to make sure that that injury would not be revealed. And so we have a lot of thoughts about why that might have happened. And one of the most common ones would be, well, they're underinsured. This would cost a lot of money. But that wasn't exactly what our survey was showing, because our survey showed that about 78% still had insurance. It could still be a cost thing. It could still be high copays, high deductibles, but this isn't a purely non-insured issue. Of these people, too, we were looking at how many of them are getting regular care from a medical professional. And less than half, 48%, said that they had a primary care. And that was including someone that they have seen in the last 2 years. You're technically supposed to see your primary care doctor every year, but we all know that doesn't really happen. So we extended it a little bit to be 2 years, but still less than half were seeing them every 2 years or 3 years. Compared to that, more than half, 52%, were at least seeing a physical therapist regularly. And at least 61% were seeing a massage therapist regularly. We tried to look at the reasons. We asked them what reasons would this be the case, and there wasn't a big consensus. The biggest thing was cost still, and so that goes back to kind of copays or deductibles. They might have insurance, but what type of insurance do they have? What type of specialist do they need? Does that specialist take their insurance? There's a bunch of open questions that when we do a second survey, we're going to delve a little deeper into. But the ones that kind of tugged at my heartstrings and made me feel sad as a physician was almost 40% said that the reason they didn't seek care, or one of the reasons they didn't seek care, was they had a distrust in the doctor's ability to help. They just didn't think that a doctor could help them. 38% thought that it wasn't a big deal at the time, which is fair, but then when you do think it is a big deal, I hope you can come and see one of us. 32% said that it was a fear of either losing their job or not getting paid. So that brings back the getting paid per show or your contract. 33% said that it just didn't have time. And 20% said that it had to do with others' perceptions, meaning not wanting to let their team down or their group down, which again plays huge roles in not only we think a lot of our kind of solo acrobats, but in group acts, there's a whole different dynamic to it. You're not the only person there. You're part of a team, and you don't want to let the team down from an injury that you might not think is a big deal at that time. And so that was a big part of what our data showed, which was our first initial survey, which really pushed us forward on kind of the next things we're looking at and what we're looking at this conference. One of the big things that we're looking at this conference, in addition to kind of how elite athletes and elite performers differ from the general public and how you should do it, one of the big themes of this year is actually women's health. And neither me and Scott are women. And
Surprise.
so we brought some really, really great speakers, which I'm really excited about, that I can be like, hey, this is a platform for you guys to talk about this, but it's an important platform nonetheless. And we're laughing, but I think this is keenly important. And so we have Dr. Erickson. Dr. Ty Erickson's one of the leading kind of OBGYN reconstructive surgeons, who's going to be talking about stress urinary incontinence, and an issue that happens for a lot of people. Of when you jump on a trampoline sometimes, and especially after you've had a kid, sometimes you pee a little bit. And that's normal. And there's things that we can do about it still medically. So he's going to talk about that. Dr. Verchinen is going to be talking about pregnancy in the elite athlete. And so, what do you do leading up to pregnancy, and what do you do coming off of pregnancy? Like, when is it okay to come back? Because also, coming back to a hand balancing act and coming back to flying trapeze, where you're in a big break where it's stretching those abdominal muscles, is very different. Is very, very different and needs kind of specialized looking at the individual artist. How did the pregnancy go? What issues were happening? And what is the specialized return plan, given that circus is not a monolith? Like, there's a bunch of different types of athletes, and there's a bunch of different types of acts. And so that's just going into our data and kind of what spun off of it, because it's definitely important data to have, but it is literally the first stone. It is the first step that's like jumping off a bunch of other research and data. And it's been really exciting for me to get to look at this data and see where we're going to go from here. And I'll leave it to Scott then.
Thank you. And
Yeah,
thank you, Scott. We're at the 30-minute mark. So if you want to just take us into our outro of sharing about Circus Meets Medicine.
absolutely. Well, yeah, it's going to be February 22nd, an all-day event at the
March.
Foundation building. Oh, shit. March 22nd. It's not in the past, as it turns out. Last year's was, but March 22nd at the UNLV Foundation building. It'll be running from 9:30 a.m. when doors open until roughly 9 p.m. We're going to have presentations, as Nate discussed. We're also going to explore women's health from the perspective of a performer. My friend Alia Titarenko is going to speak on her various perspectives as two-time world champion in sports acrobatics, 22 years as a performer for Cirque du Soleil, working as a coach, and her experiences as a mother who is still continuing to perform. And interestingly enough, a mother to now the most recently crowned world champion in sports acrobatics. Who knew? But yeah, we're very excited to have everyone there, and it's just going to be a good time. We're going to have as many different types of performances as we can to try and basically highlight different issues that might pop up. And one other thing I just want to pop in before we take off, it's not necessarily just medicine. We're also fascinated by the psychology behind all of it. I think that you can't really completely detangle the physiology and the psychology when it comes to things like this.
Which is why we are having Dr. Isaiah Lynn, who happens to be my best friend since preschool, but is also a PhD philosopher in philosophy of aesthetics in California, is speaking about the philosophy of performance and well-being and kind of the intertangledness of performance, art, beauty, and well-being for all of society. So yes, whether you are a physician, a physical therapist, a massage therapist, a student, a philosopher, or someone who is interested in this, Circus Meets Medicine is going to have something for you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you both so much, Dr. Nate, Scott. It's brilliant. I highly encourage everyone that can make it in Vegas. The link to sign up to go to Circus Meets Medicine will be in the show notes of this episode for listeners. I am so grateful for you both, and I love that the work that you're doing, and I'm very grateful and fortunate to be doing advocacy work alongside of you in different capacities. I'm very excited as well to come to Circus Meets Medicine. I will be there as well for a portion of it. So I know that it's going to be amazing. And again, Scott and Dr. Nate are doing several efforts. So please follow them. Either one of you, do you want to give your social media so people can follow you? And if you have maybe a jointed effort website so that they can see the other events that you guys have throughout the year?
Yeah. My Instagram is NC Hollister. That's NCHOLLISTER. Or you can follow both of us at Circus Meets Medicine on Instagram as well.
Yep. And I have a YouTube channel where I try and provide resources for free for up and coming circus artists. If you just search Scott McDonald Acrobat, you'll find me. My Instagram is at Scott A. McDonald. That's MC, not MAC. And we will actually also be live streaming the conference on my Instagram just to try and reach a larger audience of people who perhaps could not attend in person. So, yeah.
Thankfully. Yeah, there will definitely be, I'm sure, a lot of people that'll be tuning in nationwide. So thank you again for your great work. And I'll leave the audience with the Live Like an Acrobat podcast is also available on Circus Talk, the inclusive, independent, and international online network for the circus industry. Circus Talk's mission is to create a level playing field for this industry and democratize access to information. Until next time, everyone, I'm your host, Shenea Stiletto. This is the Live Like an Acrobat podcast. Thank you for tuning in.